What the hell?
Sorry.
Is that you? Oh.
No, that's not me. That's some idiot yelling.
The guy with the no shirt has followed you tons.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. This is the QUACKCAST, the Drunk Duck QUACKCAST, or the Duck Web Comics QUACKCAST. I'm Ozone Ocean, and with me is Baines. Hey, Baines.
Hello.
Hey, Tons.
Hello.
And hi, Pit.
Hi, Oz.
So we're all together, and we're talking about working with political messages in comics, or working with some sort of agenda, and basically, yeah, working with like a political agenda, whatever, like a message in your work and getting it across in a kind of good way that's going to get a decent response without ruining the piece of work that you're making. And changing minds, actually being effective. But before we get into that, got to bring up the featured comic. The featured comic, I featured a comic this week, a lovely, really, really good comic called Monkey Nukes. Oh god, that title, Monkey Nukes. So, listen to me talk about Monkey Nukes. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my featured comic for the week was Monkey Nukes. Monkey Nukes is a very enjoyable story comic. Once you start it, you'll soon be engrossed in the lives and struggles of the characters as they go about their days, bursting with potential and secrets in 1980s London. I could go on, but Simon Mackey explains it far better himself. So, in his own words, Monkey Nukes is set in West London in 1984. It tells the story of the birth of Scottish-themed vegetarian hangout, the Monkey Nukes, and the bedsitter society that surrounds it. A directionless young language teacher's loose-end life is further unsettled when the cause of a bitterly remembered heartbreak returns to fall into his best friend's arms. Adam desperately needs to get her back. Or does he? Maybe some other destiny awaits him as he stumbles through the following confusion of modelling kits, murder and cappuccinos, narcotics and Walkmans, nuclear war and Betamax, love and friendship, beer and cigarettes, and more beer. The story's script and artwork are all collaborations between the graphic artists Simon Mackey and Ben Rowden, who have collaborated on a number of webcomics, comic strips, CD covers, and illustrations since first meeting in 1984. Coincidentally, when this comic is set. I would say Simon and Ben are probably doing this comic from experience. The events within it are things they have experienced themselves. So this is quite interesting. It could be semi-biographical work. The art style is in a stylized comic strip form with pen and ink and digital color. Monkey Nukes is a marvelous snapshot of the 1980s with a solid gold ring of authenticity. It has great art and an excellent writing style. And when I say solid gold ring of authenticity, this is not some pastiche of the 1980s where you see a little mix of various things from the 1990s and early 2000s and the early 2000s person's idea of what the 1980s was, which is always rings very false and looks a bit crap. No, this is very authentic, not only from the kinds of things you see in the comic, obviously not people on mobile phones or anything like that, but the attitudes of the characters, the sort of things they do. Like Saturday, Adam goes and to the record fairs and secondhand shops and that picks up what's new, and they go to the record shops actually to see all the new releases and the new sorts of music available. These were the sort of things that you had to do in the 1980s if you wanted to keep up with the current music and what was available, because you just couldn't do a search on the internet at all. So completely different way of thinking and different practices and stuff like that, and all that is very much in evidence in the comic, as well as a lot of stuff that is directly relatable to people today. We haven't changed that much, obviously, so there's people going and meeting up at pubs and clubs and dancing together and all that kind of thing. So I hope you enjoy Monkey Nukes, Simon Mackey, rated M. And that was our featured comic, Monkey Nukes. And guess what? We have the featured music now. Gummalus has given us the featured theme. And that little scamp, Gummel, that tiny little New Zealand scamp. Big bear of a scamp.
Rascal.
Rascal. He has given us the theme to Monkey Nukes. Oh my god. Coincidence? And it was a coincidence, apparently, this time. He wasn't doing it just because it was a feature. He already had this underway. So, thank you for that, Gummels. Having it a nice little coincidence there. Monkey Nukes feature and Monkey Nukes music. So, the theme. Long black roads, damp streets reflecting yellow streetlights, and red taillights streaking ahead in the dark. Friday night is the time for parties, pubs, and potential. One drink follows another. Friendship flows with the beer. Danger lurks in the shadow. Perfect homage to early 80s electronica. So take it away, Gummels, with Monkey Nukes. Was the featured music. Thank you very much for that, Gummalus. Monkey Nukes. What a strange name for a comic, but if you read it, you'll find out why it's called Monkey Nukes. You will find out why. And that's a very 1980s thing to have those kind of words combined. Monkey Nukes. It's just pure 80s. All right, so political agendas in comics and anything else, any creative project. So, Chance, you made a news post about this, and yeah, but you're not saying what you are not saying is don't put political agendas in things. You're not saying that.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, I don't think it's possible. Even if you try, you are still going. You are going to put in a political message that is going to be even more prominent if you try not to do something. It's
perhaps
nature.
But what we're really talking about is when people are deliberately putting something in rather than trying not to, but they want to put something in and they want to give something. They want to open people's eyes to something or show a particular point of view, and they're putting that in there to be understood and to hopefully change people's minds. So, that's why they're doing it. And there are a lot of good ways to do it and a lot of bad ways to do it.
Yeah. The idea and what I was trying to say is that if you want to advocate about something, and you totally should, there is no, I don't like this trend of keep politics out of comics and stuff. We don't want them. There is no way to do that. There is no way to do that. If you have an impactful story, some kind of philosophy is still going to be in there. Some kind of situation is still going to be there. Things will still seep into a story because we are social animals and we are describing social situations. Unless it is like a guy against a mountain or something like that, you will still have interactions with other people, and you will still have.
The mountain is communism.
Exactly. I thought the zombies were communism, but anyway. The point is that you should be able to create viable, engaging story based on whatever it is you want to explore. The idea is that you want to explore something, you want to show certain situations and get people talking about them. Otherwise, it's basically propaganda. Propaganda has a problem in that it is usually very shallow and often very ham-fisted. It's not a story medium in a sense. It's like
it doesn't allow for conversation, is what you're saying. It projects one idea in an absolute and doesn't present a philosophy in a sense which has room for discussion and interpretation.
Yeah,
exactly.
I was just thinking, propaganda can be inspiring. I mean, you can be, but it's not usually an interesting creative project. Like you say, there's no
like you said on the video,
propaganda,
it's only like inspiring for people who are already on board with whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
propaganda.
Exactly.
It motivates your core group. That's what it's for.
Right.
You see, like for example, the biggest, like most well-known images of World War II propaganda are inspiring to their respective sides. Like when you have all the Allied forces, with those very nice, inspiring angles from below, and the wind in their hair and everything, and some inspiring motto, sort of like "Our boys go forth" or whatever.
Yeah.
This is to rally people to do something that they have already signed on for.
Yes.
It is not supposed to convince you. Same goes for the other side.
It convinces you if you're already on the if you don't have a conclusive stance. Because it was meant to recruit as well. But usually it was, if you don't already have an objection, then it's more chance for working.
Yes, exactly.
I guess that's true. That's what kind of advertising's all about and everything.
Yeah, you are on the correct side, that you are just being rallied to be more active about it, maybe. Like that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's not going to make people switch sides suddenly.
No.
It can't do that.
No.
It hasn't got that level of complexity.
Yeah, it's not up for conversation. The idea is, if you have art that is supposed to be stimulating free thought, critical thinking, have people consider certain ideas, experience points of view that they wouldn't normally experience, all that sort of thing. In order for get people to do that, you have to have them identify with the characters in your story. People will not identify with the characters in your story if the story is shit. Sorry. If it is like sock puppets with the author making weird noises, weird voices to voice every character, but it's really the author talking through every single one, then you don't have people immersing in the story, and you don't have people identifying with the characters. And then whatever it is that you are trying to get across, they will know it's a sleight of hand that isn't working. It is a paradigm that doesn't take if you do that. and then attacking the audience that says, okay, this is ham-fisted and garbage, attacking them by saying like, oh no, you are just anti blah 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 whatever, then that only alienates and makes people double down on whatever it is that they were originally thinking. So I don't know. Well done.
Yeah. This is what we talked about in the Patreon video, which you can get if you like $5 and up subscriber. Yeah, you can see the video version. But so what we talked about there is like some people say, look, I'm tired of coddling people. I'm tired of like leading them by the hand and sugarcoating my message. You know, if they don't get it, they should like, yeah, blah blah. I'm angry and I want them to know it. But the reality is, shouting louder at someone doesn't work. That doesn't convert them to your side. It doesn't convert you to their side. So why should it work in reverse? We have to communicate with people. And, you know, there are ways of communicating that can make people empathize with us or sympathize with our point of view. And so that's basically what Tansa's whole thing is about with this, political agenda.
Well, it also makes for better storytelling as well, because if you're writing something that has an agenda to it, there's likely going to be counterpoints to that agenda, or else you're just kind of saying something that everybody already knows. And if there's counterpoints, that provides lots of good opportunity to explore those other viewpoints and to kind of put yourself in the shoes of somebody you might not agree with and write from their viewpoint. And there's been tons of interesting characters made that way.
Yeah, definitely. Chance has got
and
some
situations
in her without Moonlight. So she has her Nazi characters like Raban, who has a certain point of view, and he's not very sympathetic, and yeah, like, but we're sort of getting his point of view, and from a quite realistic perspective, as well as more sympathetic characters as well. You know, the current characters, but so yeah, that's a good example of a complex comic that goes into very complex political point of views, from Orestes with his communist resistance, and all different people with their different ideals and things like that. So
the idea was, and I'm not sure if I actually succeeded completely. We'll see in the end. But I wanted people to not know the alignment of the characters, the political alignment, before they actually get to know them as people. So, and I hope that not every character can be like that. You cannot guess the political party that character ascribes to immediately, because in a while it will become apparent who falls where, because at the time you couldn't escape that. But I wanted for it to seem uncertain.
Yeah.
Except for specific people that are hardliners, but the others that aren't should be less easy to discern.
Yeah, because you're not drawing political caricatures or straw men kind of thing. Yeah. That's the other point. So, like Pitt's talking about, you have these different characters and you explore the point of views who you don't agree with. That's the good way of doing it. The bad way is to have your character facing off against straw men. So you have the nasty, evil characters who represent point of views that you don't agree with, so you make them super evil. Like the old anti-Semitic kind of stuff where we had heroic, white Anglo-Saxon person, against like the crafty, nasty Jews or something. You had that kind of writing, and that was really... That wasn't just a German thing. That was popular all the way through the 1930s and 20s and stuff like that. There was a lot of that kind of stuff. And
continued after. I mean, just it wasn't like against the Jews.
No, it's Chinese Jews, and all sorts of things.
You always had, like I remember specifically during the 80s, for some reason, if you wanted the crafty, sly a cheater sort of character. They had either an Italian name or a Greek name.
Yeah, well, you think about like Tintin, who is it? The Lopolos or whatever it is. Populous, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, in reality, I think that was sort of based on who was that? There was a famous Greek shipping magnate who made his money through. Yeah, there you go. Through rather dodgy kind of channels.
Very dodgy.
Yeah, so he became like the template. Became a bit of a cliche. Like in like British media, cliche is based on Australian kind of people who take over the media and turn everything into right wing and newspapers with tits on page 3, because it's all based on Rupert Murdoch. So he's become the cliche supervillain of owning media. So we always have that kind of thing. But we're sort of getting off the topic there. But yeah, straw men, that's not a way of exploring different point of views. Don't bloody use them. Unless you are doing propaganda, then go for it. Or comedy. Comedy is a tricky thing, because comedy is often based on broad kind of stereotypes in order to work. So yeah, that's a tricky thing. I think now that's interesting, because we haven't really touched on this. We didn't touch on this in the video. Comedy is, you need kind of really broad brush stereotypes and cliches often in order to make things funny, because if you go into the complexity, then it no longer becomes funny anymore. So if you are really simplistic, you can get your point across in a lot easier through comedy. So
I think that comedy can have nuance.
Oh, it can.
But I also think that
but often it doesn't.
Yeah, often it doesn't. But you have good comedy and not so good comedy. The thing is that if you do have stereotypes, I have noticed that the comedies that are actually efficient, you tend to see the stereotypes across the board. There is no one is above being satirized.
In a good comedy, yeah.
Yes, even the ones that, for example, whatever the author of the comedy believes, they will satirize also their own side. It will not be off limits, let's say, the satire.
A good thing like...
so then...
No, go on.
Exactly. No, you go on.
A good thing like Seinfeld, for example. So that's sort of done through a very Jewish-American point of view. And, you know, the Jewish American characters are often made fun of like the most in that. So they make fun of people who, like, there's Soup Nazi and other characters like this. So yeah, no one is above it. But in the majority of comedy, I'd probably say, because the majority is always a bit more lower quality. You do have a lot of straw men. That's a really popular thing. You know, archetypes that become straw men, and yeah, this guy's a bad guy because of this and this trait or whatever, and you push your political point of view through that, which you do find a lot more in comedy these days. And when it's mostly straw men and stuff, it's really ineffective. So yeah, I find myself sort of moving away from poor political comedy because it just veers on propaganda. And unfortunately, more than ever, comedy is looked on as being some kind of voice of politics, and it's really because it has to rely on such broad brush stereotypes and things. It's such a poor medium for that, because it so easily falls into just propaganda.
Especially when it's partisan.
Yeah.
On either side, like we're kind of in an age of like the bad comedy being very partisan, and like pro-establishment. So that's like pretty much the enemy of comedy.
Yeah.
You know, when you're not poking holes in the powerful, but you're like, okay, well, I like this side of the powerful, so I'm gonna like champion that. You know?
And there's less.
That's annoying to me.
There's less room for the subtlety you need. There are excellent political comedies that you know, they have the subtlety, they have the nuance. In the Thick of It, that's the British thing. That was really well done. House of Cards isn't a comedy; it's a drama. I can't mention that. But yeah, so like Yes Minister, it's another British one that's it's got the full complexity there, which I think you need in a political comedy. Broad brush stuff, you can't properly do political comedy, or you I don't think at all. There has to be subtlety and nuance, because propaganda does not serve anyone. You know, unless you want to just energize your base, but that's pretty sick. It's pretty worthless, basically.
I mean, if you have a real point of view that's genuine, I guess it could work, right? Like, even if it's more kind of simple, less nuanced. Like, if you do have a legitimate point of view and you're not kind of following... There's not like a little bit of propaganda, or you're not just sort of eating the propaganda and kind of regurgitating it. I guess I'm thinking more of the like current politics, like following the daily news and like doing comedy about that. That's the stuff that I find is like awful these days. I mean, if you have a show that's making a larger point and has a real point of view, then there's good stuff. I don't watch enough to give examples.
Well,
all the examples I can think of are bad.
I think I know what you're talking about, in that, say, if we're always following the scandal of the day, and always chasing that, and you're politicizing whatever sound bites are coming out, that's, it's ephemeral kind of stuff. It's creating, creating problems, creating scandal out of momentary stuff, and creating news out of it, basically. But we're moving away from getting the political agenda in fiction here. But it is a good point, though. It is a good point. And we should have a larger podcast about comedy, I think, and that could really play into that, because it's a big subject.
Yes, absolutely. Another thing that should be considered, I think, is that you want... I think that a big problem that is really surfacing today is that people become extremely aggressive in pushing their agenda through whatever story. The point that the story becomes unimportant, and they feel that if they have the right agenda, and that's all that matters, even if the story is weak. So it's like, don't pay attention to the story. Look at what I'm saying. Like, nobody has cared of the particular thing that you are pushing, and that is very unfortunate, because in the end, what you have is... I'm trying to find a word that is podcast friendly. You have a mess that is not going to even get you what you want, unless the thing that you want is ego stroking from people that are already on board with whatever it is you are believing in, or that you are a member or an advocate of. But it is actually regressing your side. It is making your side lose ground, whatever your side is, because everybody else is extremely put off. So,
preaching to the choir or within an echo chamber that has limited returns. You're not expanding your circle, and your circle's basically, it's going to shrink in the end. So, Especially, I've seen things that they're pushing a political message, a political message that I agree with. So it's on my side. I'm sort of a left wing guy, and I sort of go along with those point of views. And I've seen things that they're trying to express that something within that point of view, and they're doing it so badly that I can't endorse them anymore. I can't read them or watch them because I know the subject, and they're doing it a disservice and ruining. So yeah, not only are they not forwarding an agenda and making people who don't agree with it, they're losing the people who do agree with it. Which yeah.
And there is this other thing as well. For example, I'm going to talk about just a little bit about what I'm making. Everyone in my casting Without Moonlight has a political agenda, let's say, or they believe in certain political things. Not a single one of them shares my political agenda. I don't agree with any of them. So, and the reason for that is I would love, I think that a couple of my characters that hopefully survive, they will develop in a way that they will come to share my political agenda. But, right now, where they are, in the 40s, the occupation, the spectrum that was as it was, and everything else, it would be anachronistic for them to share what I believe and what I think should be done in terms of politics and polity and stuff like that. So if I were to insert a character or imbue a character with my ideas, they would be extremely out of place for the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
So even by stretching it, having like people that are quote unquote ahead of their time and stuff, there is a limit to how ahead of your time you can be given certain circumstances. So that's another element that I would like you to consider, that if you are doing, for example, a historical comic or something, and you don't put it in a fantasy, which is different ballgame, consider that people have certain trajectories in which they used to think, and you have to allow them to channel that, at least to an extent. They don't have to be hardliners, they don't have to be fanatics, but they have to have certain, let's say, common unconscious nuances about their politics that fall in specific categories or ranges.
Yeah,
that's what
they fit within the context of their time. They're not anachronistic, which is quite jarring. If like say a series that I really sort of got into, Penny Dreadful, which is a fun sort of gothic series set in the late 19th century, early 1900s, something like that, in Britain, and it's sort of slight gothic fantasy in that we have like the vampires are real and witches and all this, but it's set in the reality of the late 19th century. So yeah, it's in the real world of London, which that's what made it really interesting. So it wasn't just a pure fantasy; it was like set in that real world, and that introduced a whole bunch of interesting challenges. So you have your particular characters there. You have this main lady character in there, and she sort of fights vampires as well, but and she can handle a gun or whatever, a stake, or however she was fighting the vampires in the first few episodes. But everything was set up in a believable way. So like this particular character, he knew how to hunt vampires because he used to do safaris across Africa. So, he knew about killing game, and he taught this lady how to, do this and that. And then there was this character who came from America, and, he used to be in the, fight Indians and stuff like that. So he knew how to shoot a gun, and he did it really well. So there was things like were set up quite well, but as you got on in the series, things sort of went off the rails. Maybe they had poor writers or something, but they had to compress everything towards the last few episodes because they got cancelled or something. They wanted to finish it, but they introduced these two new characters. One was a psychiatrist, and she, that was quite would have been a slightly unusual profession for a woman at the time, but that was still done quite well. She was like realistically set up, and it was quite well done. But there was this other character who came along, and she just wore trousers. Wasn't explained why. She was like super educated, like she was basically a Mary Sue kind of character. Super educated. She was a super fighter, could do anything, and it was so jarring after they've done so well to set these other characters up within a realistic matrix of the time, and then have this lady who comes along doing martial arts and everything. And in the final scene of the TV show, they've got all the main characters, including like the psychiatrist lady as well. She's an older lady, and the super fighter lady, and everyone's doing like karate kicks and stuff like that against the vampires and the monsters fighting. Yeah, this elderly psychiatrist, and then there's the super fighter, and they just totally destroyed what they'd set up in the world. And that's not political agenda, I suppose. But
to say, sometimes you might need something that wasn't really around at the time, whatever time it is that you want to emulate. But you should do the work and look for the outlier, because in every part of history there have always been outliers, people that did extraordinary things, going against the grain of whatever their society had, doing things that were very much unprecedented for their gender role or for their age or whatever it is. For example, for the script for the movie that I wrote, which is again set in World War II, called for a female surgeon. So that was extremely, I felt that this would be an anachronism, that at the time we had an extremely man-oriented field of medicine. There were like 99.9% men. They gave women that we did have female doctors, but not surgeons, because they gave flack to the ladies during medical school. It was a horrid situation for women that dared infringe into the medical profession. Anyway, however, I told myself, okay, before I start concocting this story that I will find some other way to make her a surgeon, let me see if there actually were surgeons at all that were of the female persuasion during the 30s. And I found two of them in all of Greece. They existed. And they had very specific stories. It took a lot of digging to find them. But I did find that they existed. So I followed their path through that. It still sounds extraordinary in the story, but it conforms to the rules of society at the time enough to be believable because it did actually happen. I don't know if you get what I'm saying. But always history has the rules. There are always the outliers, and if you want to do something that sounds anachronistic, before you do it, first look for it in history to see how it was packaged. Because it would probably happened somewhere. You have to find it and find how it was done so that it will feel authentic, even though it is so extraordinary.
Yeah, exactly. You got to show the reality that this was real, and here it is. This is how it happened, and that makes logical sense. Yeah, that's a damn good point. What are some good examples of things with political agendas that were done well?
What did you look up?
Good examples of things with political agendas that were done well. I mean, I can think of many. Handmaid's Tale, something I brought up in the video. I don't think I talked about in the QUACKCAST. Great example, something with a political agenda, and it can actually change minds. A mouse about the Holocaust. Cats of the Nazis. I hate that.
Yeah.
And the mice of the Jews and homosexuals and disabled people, you know,
I'm actually reading this now, and I have to go in small increments because it is so heavy with meaning. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah, V, Vendetta, that's something with a political point of view, whether you agree with it or not. It's expressed in a way that's popular. Oh, go on.
Animal Farm.
Animal Farm, yeah. Animal Farm, 1984. Those are quite well regarded. And even something like Atlas Shrugged from the other political persuasion, a lot of people are quite like that and are converted by that when they're young. I think that appeals to younger people rather than people with more worldly experience.
Also, what is called? Oh my God, I forgot it. Go on, I'll remember it.
Teletubbies, of course, that's another Tance's example. That makes us all gay by looking at Tinky Winky with his purple outfit and his triangular symbol of the coat hanger on his head. Terrible propaganda there.
In comics, the X-Men in its heyday was really well regarded.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just as a story, like the stories were great, and there was like fantasy and horror, sort of epic tales, like in the best of those comics. But it also was well regarded as being a metaphor for, any discriminated against. If I could talk, I could have said that word. Discriminated against group. It was really great. It became like a great analogy for that because the mutants were hated by
the X-Men,
by the normals.
Exactly. That's a great example. I was trying to think of interesting comics on Drunk Dark that have done that. There's a lot of preaching to the choir comics on because it is actually hard to do a nuanced political, something with a nuanced political agenda where you try and convert people. It is quite hard to do, and it's a lot easier to preach to the choir. I suppose that's why so many people do it, because that's the way you think, and it's harder to do the other point of view in an interesting way. So you do the straw men. So unfortunately, that's what we tend to do.
Well, it seems like the comics that are successful with creating that we identify with having any kind of political nuance, the political nuance is secondary. Like, for example, when you mentioned Mouse before as being a successful political comic, it's not really that political. If it's preaching anything, it's not even preaching. It's telling the story of a man who had survived Auschwitz, among many things. Its message isn't so much that, Nazis are bad. We kind of see that as a byproduct anyway. It doesn't really go into their ideology that much. It's more or less expressing the life of this man, and what we see as a byproduct is that lifestyle was difficult, and it was the result of this certain mode of thinking.
Yeah. And I think we're not. I mean, Tance, when you said political, did you actually mean politics exactly, or did you sort of mean?
I meant any kind of idea that you want to push forward, in a sense, like a philosophy, religion, political parties, political system, you name it.
Well, almost anything can be political,
methods.
which I think you said before. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I said that there is no way that you can't. There is no way to not include politics of some sort in your comic, because we are all governed by at least a few tenets of something, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So
that's what you get in a social
The-
situation.
the point is, the harder thing, and I wanted to say that, and maybe consider it if you are considering making or are making a comic that is meant to demonstrate something, is that it is hard to create a character and put yourself in their position, their point of view, and entertain as an author in your mind the ideology or the point of view or whatever that they have, which you know is not correct. And for example, when I'm writing the Nazis, it is hard. The reason it is hard is that I have to think like a Nazi, and that makes you feel dirty to do. But in order to make them sound believable, even if they are being ridiculously insane sounding or harsh or whatever, they did sound that way, by the way. It's not a cartoon villain thing. That's how they came across. But they still have a reasoning. It is warped reasoning. It doesn't have any ground on reality or actual logic. It is a series of carefully poised logical fallacies that they make as being correct. So if you make the Nazi character, you have to think like him or her and write them legit, straight up. So that's hard.
Yeah.
And especially if you feel that is a little bit of a challenge. Like if you don't feel completely secure in whatever it is you believe, I'm not talking about Nazis now, but for example, I don't know, left versus right, whatever. If you don't feel absolutely secure and grounded on your position, maybe creating a character of the opposing side and having to think like him is very threatening to you, because you might feel that might undermine your own self. So you have to consider maybe that there is also this going on when you create the straw man and the heroic other person, whatever it is. So
that's a good
that's
point.
it.
Yeah, it can be challenging to see through those other eyes and do it in a way that's not going to be a caricature, not going to be a straw man, and it can be challenging. Pinky TA, there was a slight political agenda in that, part of it is to show the glamour of war contrasting against the underlying evil and the horror of it. So there's that in Pinky TA, the immoralness of war. And it was meant to be slightly seductive by using that the glamour and the sexiness that is not necessarily inherent in war, but is inherent in the the pop culture version of war, especially like in manga and stuff like that, and action movies. And that's what Pinky TA is made of. There's fantastic looking mecha and sexy ladies and all sorts of things that you don't necessarily get in actual war, but you do get in pop culture. So yeah, that's the kind of thing in Pinky TA, and that seduces you into it. And the story is the kind of thing that sort of sets you straight. But yeah, Pinky TA isn't something that hammers you over the head with anything. And yeah, that's how I like to do that in when I express that in a story. On Drunk Duck, I can remember a particular comic. It was a religious comic, and it was called Putting Forward an Interesting Case or something. I can't remember the title of it.
Oh, yeah, I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
It was a yeah, it was something like a modest proposal, but that wasn't the title. But
that's it. Yeah, something. A proposal. Yeah.
Yeah, it was something proposal. It was like along those lines. Yeah.
So I featured this comic. You know, I read through it and I thought, yep, he's done it so well that this is featureable. This is like really well done, and he's thought about what he's writing, scientifically and philosophically. It's completely against what I could see, and you know, I know it was based on, there was a lot of logical fallacies in this comic, but that didn't stop me featuring it because he had done it so well and he had researched his case, even though I knew like he'd made a lot of errors, but he'd researched his point of view and he'd presented it in such a clever way that it was worth reading, and it was a well done piece of work. So that was something that, yeah, even though I fundamentally didn't agree with it, I didn't think it was bad. Just like Tanz's Green Mile example, you can still do something that, you know, people will not agree with, and have it worthy of being read, and a genuinely good piece of work.
Yeah, a high artistic value, let's say. Objectively, extremely well done. And still, it won't, if you believe strongly in something, it still will not convince you that it will have an impact, because it will still be good. You will not be able to say it's trash, because it will be objectively good, well done.
Exactly. Exactly. So, like, and there are examples of this in pop culture. Say, Braveheart. Something like, there's a lot of historical inaccuracies, there's anachronisms, there's a stupid political message, you know, the Scots shouting, freedom, we must have our freedom, you know, all this modern bullshit projected onto this nationalist people. It's just rubbish. But the film itself,
I love you. Always have.
The film itself is enormously popular. People love it, and it will always be a very popular piece of cinema. So even though the political message is dodgy, it doesn't matter. It's
I don't know if it's dodgy. It's just it's paint by numbers. That's all it is. I don't think it's dodgy.
Well, it's dodgy because it's the straw man kind of thing. It's a one-sided view. It's like it's saying this is a political agenda.
It's Star Wars only in old Scotland.
Star Wars applied to historical reality, which is where you get the dodginess.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it becomes propaganda as opposed to something that is pure fantasy. But it's propaganda-ish, but even though it is, it's still something that people can enjoy without thinking about that. So it still works, even though it does have that aspect to it.
And another thing is also that everything has to be like a masterpiece, and not everything has to be super nuanced. And yes, you can have the super bad guys that are one-note guys and everything. But then you have to be aware of what it is you are creating and not treat it as something more than that. Or I don't want to sound pretentious in the sense that, for example, take Sira, a new Sira, and the old Sira as well. Okay, both were, in my opinion, they are average cartoons. They are not great and they are not terrible.
Yeah.
Okay, they are passable, but you cannot. Like, they are trying to raise up this new Sira to be like the Miyazaki of its time. It's not. Mm-hmm. When you and I'll kid you not, I have seen characterizations like this. But when you do something, when you go to this level of extreme, play up something that is just average, then it's going to be considered bad. The person who goes to see a Miyazaki level artistic product doesn't get that.
Right.
So that is also a disservice.
Yeah.
Or it is hailed like a super progressive, revolutionary thing for women and stuff, and instead it isn't.
Well,
Yeah, you have the same dissonance happening.
Yeah, well, in that kind of in that example, you have a weird thing where you have you're preaching to your choir, and your choir becomes your cheerleaders, and you have a whole bunch of people saying, yeah, this is the greatest thing ever because of this, because of that, and they're promoting it because it supports their particular point of view. And that really doesn't have anything to do with its creative merits, which is unfortunate. You don't want to just promote something because it supports a point of view. When you're talking about a creative piece of work, that's then you're not being a critic. Then you're not being a supporter of pop culture. You're undermining your role, I think, then. Because then you'll just promote any old crap. Yeah. Just because it supports your point of view. And you'll be foisting, subpar kind of things onto people just because it agrees with your view of the world.
Exactly. I mean,
sorry, I'll just say one more thing. Say, when I'm doing featured comics, there is no way in hell that I'm going to feature comics that support my political point of view, or only support my political point. I mean, I will put comics up that I think, yeah, wow, I really think the same as this, and he's expressed that. Well, sure, but I'll, promote. It doesn't matter. It could have something that's completely opposite to me. I've featured comics like that. I am not someone who only just supports things that agree with what I think. I think that is a really awful thing to do, as in my role of featuring work. Because then I will be betraying all the people who read the site, or whoever look at Drunk Duck and use the site. That would be a nasty thing, because that would mean that anyone who does things that have a political point of view that's different to me would never ever get their work featured. So yeah, sorry, you don't agree with what I say, and that would also mean that people who have a political point of view different from me would never see work that reflects what they believe in, because I would just never do that. So that's why I think only promoting work or mainly promoting work because it has a particular political point of view in the role of a critic is a bad thing to do. You are a bad critic if you do that. You've really got to be more open. Sorry, Tance, I just had to get that bit of a rant off me.
I absolutely agree. I'm trying to think of a way to put it and phrase it. Like, everything in art has its place. In the sense that sometimes you do need to broad brush certain things, or sometimes you do have a reason to show the worst of a specific thing rather than the best and the middle. And that's fine, as long as you, first of all, are aware that you are telling a story, which is very, very important, so that you have to conform to the requirements of a good story, like having the plot and having proper development arcs for the characters, and beginning, middle, end, that sort of thing. That will still be entertaining. So You can absolutely, totally do that. As long as your story still works as a story. Now, whether you will get flack for doing it, that's again a different matter. But the story itself is going to be entertaining.
Yeah.
There are tons of stories where the Russians are the bad guys. They are one-tone bad guys. They are all nefarious, growling, dickheads, basically.
Immoral, yeah.
Immoral, sly, backstabbing, you name it. They are the devil. However, the story is very well built. And the story works pretty well. It's entertaining. And although it is almost of propaganda, it still is fun.
Yeah.
Okay. People will consider it. It's just not the type of story that is going to have do the whole let's share our ideas and think about discussing. Okay,
Yeah,
it is not going to be that sort of political agenda.
It's not going to change anybody's minds, like we said before.
No, it's going to be more towards the propaganda scope, the spectrum. It's going to be closer to that than anything else. And that's all there is to it. You should not try to push a story like that as a cutting edge of philosophical anything. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it will not be. In order to be able to have an argument or a conversation that will be taken seriously, you need to have nuance and you need to have a certain range in all your characters. If you are not going for that, then that's fine. Just remember that you are still telling a story. And then people will be entertained. And some will give you, some guff about being very one-sided and biased, and you make us look, yada. Okay. But still, it will be an entertaining story, and people will like it and consume it and stuff. If you forget the story and you keep the other elements, you are going to have the problem and the mess that we are talking about. And then you are going to need to call people anti-something and dismiss them.
Yes, very true. Well,
so I'm done.
We're sort of getting towards the end of the hour here. So does anybody want to bring up anything else in this regard?
Join us on Patreon.
To see our videos, see us in our sexy outfits. Okay, we are going to have to do some kind of outfit. Well, we do this every now and again. We'll dress up for another Patreon video.
Yeah, we can do that.
And by the way, the site now has email notifications.
Yeah, we just did it like 10 years ago. So get into that.
So you can sign up to get an email when your favorite comic updates.
Oh, wow.
Unless everyone except me already knew that. In which case, good for you.
Good for you. I like that passive-aggressive tone. All right. So thank you guys for listening to our political agenda QUACKCAST. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay.